Y'all are in for a treat today. We've got Kale calling all the way from New Zealand, who comes in with a really specific challenge around letting go and delegating in his business. And you might be surprised to hear how the conversation really opens up to a very different place where he understands that that was really a symptom of a greater challenge. And with that, I think let's just dive in and let you enjoy that conversation that we have with Kale.
Enjoy.
This is Your Business Hotline, where we take calls and answer questions from real business owners to help them design a business that works for the life they want.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Dara.
And together we have more than 25 years of business building experience that we are ready to share with you. Want an unusual glimpse behind the curtain of these companies? Let's get into it.
Hey, Kale, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're happy to have you, and I have a feeling you are going to hold the banner for farthest away guest here to Forth. Tell everyone where you're calling in from.
Calling in from Dunedin, New Zealand. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. So a little away from where you two are right now.
Yeah, a little bit. We're in Atlanta today. Also, thanks for that geography lesson, because we wouldn't have known that.
We would not have known that. Thank you very much.
So let's get to it. Tell us, why are you calling? What's the challenge? And tell us then a bit about the background that might support us in supporting you.
Yeah, so I have two companies. The first is a marketing agency with another bloke who lives out in LA. And so it's called K&J Growth. We've had that company now for 6 years. We've scaled that beyond 7 figures. And we've got core team members in there that have allowed us to, one, scale and find and employ the right people. The second is, obviously, we've been doing it for a while. And so we've been pretty good. That business has given me the ability to be relatively hands-off. The second company I have is an e-commerce business called Rugby Bricks, and we are growing about 100% year on year, and we've passed that 7-figure mark. And one of the things that we're struggling with, or at least personally I am, I don't know if the company is, but the ability for me to remove myself and my time and figure out how to focus more on the strategy as opposed to the day-to-day. I'm still pretty heavily in this business. I think I've managed to figure it out in our services business, where we've used the right people, we have a GM, and we've been able to go through that process. But at the moment, one could be my learning, where I don't have enough time or reps on the board to figure out how to do it. But the second is, ideally, I should be trying to figure the strategy out. And at the moment, I'm doing a lot of what the marketing is, or leading our growth in that area. So that is my problem, and I'd love any form of support or ideas from the two of you.
Absolutely. So to synthesize, you're working more in the business than on the business, and your goal is to work more on the business, correct?
That's the one.
Yeah, and just as a resource for you or any of our listeners, if you've never read The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, that's a really great resource that talks exclusively about this concept of how do you not be the cog in the wheel, and how can the wheel operate with or without you in it, which isn't always plausible early in a business. And depending on someone's business, they may be the entire business. They may be a solopreneur, in which case that may or may not ever be the goal. But if that is the goal, which I'm a big fan of, it's the only way I sold one of my companies. You don't, like, if you are the only reason that business is operating or a major part of it, then you are pretty handcuffed to that business. So we're grateful for this question because it's really important. So talk to us about the necessity for the reason that you are so intertwined with the day-to-day versus how much of it is a mindset thing for you that you're having a hard time simply letting go and letting other people do things maybe equal to, less than, greater than, who knows, because we don't know your team. But that perception for you, what's the dichotomy between those two things?
Our focus is digital growth, and we've been doing that as I've filled that role inside of this company from when there was just the two of us to now there's about 7 of us, and the CMO or the head of growth in that situation, but I'm also the CEO now. And having to do maybe both of those functions, a lot of maybe the default of people asking me, saying, okay, cool, should we run this? What does that experiment look like? But also the other things, which are, how do we continue to find those sort of growth markets? And then actually the execution of some of those things, which is, the physical, okay, how do we run this EDM? What do we do to write the copy that's more persuasive here? How do we actually pull and use product and levers with influencers to get those things over the line? And so I think that for me is maybe delineating those roles, because we haven't really hired a CMO. Plus, I don't know if that's the right option, but someone maybe with the same level of experience to be able to come into that role and do it as effectively, and the resource or the cash flow to do that. So I thought about it, and that's probably as far as I've gotten, but trying to figure that out and maybe hopefully empower the other team members to take up some more of those roles, or hopefully for them to come in and actually say, okay, cool, someone can take that over. Because we have a junior marketing person and another founder who's based on the brand, but not doing a lot of what the functional stuff is around this.
Are there any blocks in your mind that are preventing you from doing it? Because I'm hearing you say in your primary business or your first business, you did this successfully. So that's leading me to believe you have the muscle to do it metaphorically. Is there anything that's holding you back in your mind from doing it here?
Maybe fear of letting it go. If I have a crack at giving it away, that it might not be executing it at the same rate. We're trying, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, we've got a pretty high growth rate, that 150% sort of year on year. And I want us to maintain that. It's a cool pace. It's something that for us, we're profitable already and we want to continue to do that. I'm not sure if I stepped away from that marketing piece that we would be able to do that. So there could be that. There's definitely hesitancy there.
One thing you shared too when we were talking before the episode is that you use platforms like ClickUp and Slack, and you have some methods in order to organize information in your business. Anytime I hear someone say they want to duplicate themselves in their business, I always wonder what their SOPs or standard operating procedure is, and if they've been able to document it. Do you feel like that's something you'd be able to put into ClickUp or Slack so that someone could kind of follow in a paint by numbers format and be able to do the things you're doing? Or do you feel like there's a lot of I'll
more art than science.
Yeah, like a little bit secret sauce of what you specifically have versus like I could put these steps down for someone. If they were to follow them, I feel like they would have a reasonable degree of success.
Yeah, good call. The thing is, we've done this inside of K&J. We have, a GM who's able to replicate this for clients and some of the growth tactics and metrics. But I think the business that we're going through with Rugby Bricks is based on organic. Mm-hmm. So we use a lot of paid media inside of K&J Growth. And for our clients, we have really strong SOPs around what they need to do, how they do it. But there's no reason why those couldn't be duplicated across, or figuring out what the organic version of these things look like. I'd say one is laziness. Like, I don't enjoy writing SOPs. And I've been very fortunate to have someone else in our teams do that. The second is probably there's a little bit of, I would say, consumer psychology in the way that I'm able to look at things, how copy's written, that type of stuff, and then how we inform, write, and script some of our content, and then the growth metrics that leads to creating product, and then how we take that to market. So there could be some pieces there, but definitely, I think even as you say SOPs out loud, I'm like, oh, they don't really exist very much. Or they do, and they're very, very loose.
Which is okay. You don't have to be the person that does everything in your business. That goes down to the entire crux of your question in the first place. So the fact that you're already delegating those out to other people who are absolutely capable and perhaps enjoy that better is a great exercise in the exact question that you're asking us in the first place. So congratulations. You're already using that skill that you have. Continue to do that. Second is like any 80, yeah, exactly. Like in any 80-20 policy, so to speak, you're demonstrating too that there are certain things that are that 20% that you have that is hard to replicate for someone else, but it has an 80% impact, like meaning there's so much more return on the investment of your time and energy spent in that place than in other places where SOPs may not be that for you. That sounds very clear. But that understanding the customer psychology and how to do your messaging and copywriting sounds like a skill that is so unique to you that sure, there are other people on the planet who could be great at that. And maybe over time, if you want to get even less entrenched in the business, that might be something that you hire for. But right now, we're not trying to turn on a light switch and say, Kale goes from where he is to completely out of the business in tomorrow or 30 days or maybe even 60 days. But progress is what we're aiming for versus perfection here. So my curiosity is have you done any sort of analysis or assessment of what are those couple things that really Kale is best to do, which even what you said really functions as working on the business, not in the business, because that's high-level strategy. And then that allows you to delegate to other people in a way that hopefully is delineated enough through clear procedures that either pre-exist or get created as you go. I'm a big fan of don't just go creating things for the sake of creating them, that if your team doesn't have the wherewithal or the bandwidth to do that, to use tools like Tango app, where it'll follow their keystrokes on the computer and create SOPs that you can edit in real time with them, or that as they're doing it, to write out step by step and say, this is how I'm doing this thing. If someone else had to come in tomorrow because I needed to take a leave of absence, could they follow this without any question or hesitation? But to do that as the thing is actually happening, which is especially relevant when new things are coming onto the table because you're driving new strategies as well. But another higher level question that I have for you is, why? Meaning, you're talking about 100% year over year growth, which is fantastic on paper. And I have a feeling that you have thought about this, just knowing what I know about you. Why are you doing it? Like, what's the bigger why behind all of it in the first place? Because if every year you're challenging yourself and your team for, we have to 100% or 100x our growth, that's a really quick path to running everyone into the ground, especially if there's not a bigger vision or value set behind that. And so if that becomes your goal, great. But I really hope that you have a clear understanding and maybe can tell us what that is, of why that is in the first place and what that's doing for you, for the people you serve, for your team, for fill in the blank, whatever that looks like. So are you able to answer that question of why you're driving the business at that rate and that feels so important to you?
Yeah, there is. And it is a good question. There's two things, and I think one is slightly more selfish on my end. The latter is that we can probably establish, maybe not a monopoly, but certainly a path where we're probably dominant business or brand inside of rugby. So the first is essentially, I know what I would like in terms of possibly how the business exits, what we have, what that potential financial goal is. The team is all incentivized with equity. So every person in the team has equity or the ability to earn equity, which is good. The second that is important to us and what we look at as a company is rugby's just a vehicle, and it's not a big one in the States, but like it's a vehicle for how we communicate, love, and interact in sport. And for us, we've seen growing up playing the sport and going through ourselves that it's relatively poorly taught and probably sits within maybe what's an old boys club. I don't know if you guys have that analogy in the States, but yeah, okay. maybe we've got it from you guys, but the process there is like, we want to be able to take it and make the sport accessible for anyone who wants to be good at it, and then give back to a game that gave us a lot. It's something that's been really, really important for us. And the thing that we have been always big on, which is outwork and outlearn. For me and how I look at rugby, one of the things that we have is that we have a, maybe, I'm not sure what the right word is to use here, but a very, don't talk about it, it's not a problem type scenario, but we want to be able to give people the green light to say, yeah, I really want to pursue this. I want to be a great athlete. And we want to change the mentality for how that looks in rugby. And for us, we think we can do that. We've got a pretty strong way to shape what the future of the game looks like. And that's a really strong driver. And I think if we continue the same growth, that we will be that dominant player in the market. And so that's a really, really big part of what we're doing. And then the other third and final piece, which I'll talk to, is I'm Māori, which is an Indigenous Kiwi. And there's our COO, she is a Pacifica. And our game is largely, predominantly played by, in terms of population basis, Māori Pacifica. And we have a huge representation, and it's a good pathway for them to come out of it. But we want to show them also you can turn the sport that you love and for those people into a professional outcome. So those are sort of the drivers. I know the first one is probably a big one for at least mine, financially incentivized. And then the latter two are things that we really care about as a group.
Which I applaud your clarity. I think that Kate and I talk about this all the time. There isn't an answer. It's whatever your definition of success is. So props to you in the first place for being so clear about what your success metrics are and why this matters to you. That's not always the case. And there isn't a right answer. It's just whatever's right for you. So love to hear that. Two, your mission orientation, I think, is something that not only is beautiful to hear, but it's going to be something that helps keep you sustained in the way that you can run this business, as well as ideally the people who gravitate towards working with you in the business. Because to grow at the rate that you're talking about, if there isn't that underpinning value system and mission orientation, it can be very easy to drive yourself and your team into the ground. And doesn't mean that doesn't go away as a potential flag to look out for on the field, which may or may not be a good rugby pun. I know nothing about rugby or if there's flags in the first place.
100%.
But it is important to consider that as you continue to grow of how much, are we able to grow for growth's sake versus how much is that continuing to support the mission, and how do I make sure myself and my team is sustained in the delivery of that mission in the first place?
Yeah, I think Dara's going to be shocked by this question because it feels a little bit like maybe a Freaky Friday situation where we're reversing roles. But you talked so much about your goals for the business, which Dara knows that's like my MO. It's like coded in my DNA. But I'm really curious to hear like if there are things outside of your business that you also want to be pursuing or that are taking priority, because I agree, even as someone who does systems for a living, SOPs are boring. I don't think anyone's enjoying doing them, but I've never gotten an SOP together faster than when I met my husband and we were traveling and doing all these other things. And I'm like, I cannot be in the business because I have all these other things that I want to do outside of the business. And also I want this business to still grow. And so that was a great motivator for me. So I'm wondering if there's anything outside of, because a lot of us fall victim to, we spend so much time in our business because that's our thing. Like that's our juice. That's what we wake up thinking about. So, of course, I'll just do it just to make sure that it gets done. But I'm wondering if there's anything else outside of your two businesses that's a priority for you to be spending time on.
Yeah, there is. And yeah, her name is Anna. I think that process there and trying to make that work is really, really important. She's based in Los Angeles and I'm here in New Zealand. So the ability to try and maybe look at anchoring something to that is a pretty important piece. I think that is a pretty clear driver. The second is, and the vehicle, which has been really, really important for me, is grew up in a low socioeconomic status household. So single parent on the benefit. And one of the things there, I'm also Māori, and our people are disproportionately affected by a lot of that, the economic drivers that sort of the childhood I had. And for me, Rugby Ricks and K&J provide a vehicle for, one, just being able to give back. We've put, we invest and sponsor Māori entrepreneurship. We hire, try and find people who are Māori Pacifica to bring into our businesses. And so those two things are pretty strong drivers for what I want to be able to do. And they've been, to the extent, fulfilling a lot of that, right? Which is, I can travel, I can use some of those things. But ideally, if I want to have a family in the next sort of 2 or 3 years, I'm 33. So probably looking at having kids soon. And understanding what that would look like. I imagine that would probably be a better driver, because there's no way I want to be a dad who is probably absent or not looking into focusing on how to raise the family while I'm trying to grow the businesses, because at the moment, those two things probably would be pretty incompatible. So yeah, I haven't thought about it, anchoring that though. And that's a pretty cool piece. I do like the idea of what you've said there, which is anchoring it to someone to allow you to get out of the business and making those personal drives a little bit higher. But it does serve as a way to take care of the latter thing, which is obviously sponsoring, looking after Māori Pacifica. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I know that Dara and I actually, when we first met, we shared that commonality of she had met Brendan, I had met my husband, and we realized how much that changed the way we spent time in our business, viewed the way we wanted to spend time. And if I'm being completely honest, like I didn't have a reason to be out of my business, even though I told myself that I needed to build these systems or that it would be more efficient or effective. There wasn't a bigger why. And for a lot of the reason that you stated, Kale, of like, my business is so important, it's doing so many important things. Why would I not want to eat, sleep, and breathe this thing? And then when we bring Anna into the mix, or we bring a potential family, or we bring these connections to be able to help our community, we can almost start like physically putting things on our calendar that feel as important as work. And that can shift a lot of our focus of like, okay, I want to have systems in my business, but I don't really need them, to like, no, I got to go to LA yesterday. Like I need to put these systems in place because I can't be at all these meetings and be with my lovely lady at the same time.
What better to do on that long ass flight than work on these systems and what you want to do in your business? That's really. I thought I was in a long distance relationship when I started. That is no joke.
I was about to say, you beat both of us.
Well, and also too, what Kate is saying is it just conceptually the idea that work is like gas and it will fill up whatever space you give it. So when you don't have constraints that you either create arbitrarily or are real based on the things that you're saying, it's very easy to just let that space be filled. So when you're talking about having a hard time letting go, whether it's because of the fear or just the fact that you have the space and you can, and you see that your input creates real outputs and ROI in your business and the results that you're seeing, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you don't choose to actively change something, either circumstances are going to happen that are going to cause you to require them to change, or it'll be this rude awakening of like, I wonder why things never changed, but I said that I wanted these things. So the other component to all of this is when people get to the place where they actually remove themselves from the day-to-day of the business, or they sell the business, or they retire, there's often this identity crisis of, what the hell am I supposed to do with my free time? And so part of it is even this training ground or proving ground for yourself of, if I don't start putting that in now, it's going to be that much harder for me to keep myself from meddling in the business because I won't know what to do with my time on the other side.
Oh. Yeah, some truth in there too, which is and thought through gone in the process, right? Which is how much of my identity is probably tied up in being in the businesses or executing in them. So, because it is serving a lot of some of the purpose-driven things, and societally, right, you're rewarded for that. People see that and they're saying socially, you're doing a great job in some of these other things, and it's probably maybe the lack of clarity on probably ensuring that the former works as much as the latter. So
absolutely. I mean, work addiction is one of the most culturally accepted forms of addiction that exists.
Yeah, I feel like it's the only addiction that's like promoted. It's like,
exactly.
Actually, we love you more if you're addicted to work.
Totally, which has so much to do too with the environments you put yourself in. And I know that you've been really diligent outside of work with making sure you're surrounding yourselves with other top-notch entrepreneurs. But how much is there a values alignment? Like when I started my first company about 15 years ago, I was in a community with entrepreneurs that was based on revenue. It was all 7-figure plus entrepreneurs. We were all digitally connected. And I remember seeing a thread on the Facebook page where it was all about how many hours of sleep a night does everyone get? And everyone was bragging to the hills about, well, I only get 2 and I get 4. And if I even slept that night. And I was like, no, get me out of here. Like I slept 10, yay. It's not embarrassing. I started my day at 10 a.m., that type of thing. And I realized if I continue to put myself in places and spaces where these are the values that people are championing, and that's the way that it's impacting their life, we become the people that we surround ourselves with. Osmosis is real. Financially, weight-wise, mindset, in all of these ways. There's studies to back that up. And so for you to see, hey, am I putting myself in environments where people are championing not only who I am today, but who I hope to become in the future, that's going to really support you as well. Because the more I see a lot of these communities that, in your case being, multiple 7-figure businesses, it usually is about more is always more is always more is always more. And there's usually less and less conversation around your well-being and how this business is helping to elevate and be the vehicle to fuel the life that you want and how you want to feel throughout that process. So I would continue to keep that as a North Star and a lighthouse for you as you think through this, and as you are thinking through your fundamental question of delegation and letting go in the business, and thinking like, for what, why, how, what's the order of priority, and how do I, do it all from a reverse engineered state?
Yeah. I love it. I just need to probably put that down in some form of writing. I've got it somewhere, and I do have these goals written down, but I think re-anchoring it or visiting it more frequently would probably help, and at least give a stronger purpose to actually making sure that some of these things exist, and maybe having to run SOP once or twice.
That's the thing. We never want someone in their business to get stuck in a rut where they're required to do the thing that is not their highest and best use. Like, I hate bookkeeping, and that was the first thing that I outsourced and delegated in my business. But I did need to do it for some time. One, to have an awareness enough to be dangerous, to know how to hire it well and make sure that it wasn't going off the rails. And 2, because we can't always have the resources or the time to be able to properly delegate and set someone up for success in the first place. But what we don't want is for you to get into that habit of, well, I'm already doing it. I might as well keep doing it, even if I don't like it. Especially where you are. You don't need to self-flagellate and punish yourself and continue to do the things when you have the resources and the business is demonstrating that it continues to grow year after year, that you have resources to reinvest.
Yeah. And it's not that you need to speed up at all, because clearly you are growing at lightning pace. But Dara and I said in an episode we've already recorded that like a lot of times you have to slow down to speed up. So like you're doing the unsexy things so that you can do the sexy things. So like SOPs are, even for me, and people are probably shocked to hear, like the last thing that I want to be doing. But it's the first thing that I want done when my son gets sick, or there's a family vacation, or, there's something else that's a priority where it's like, I can't be doing this myself or showing someone how to do it in this particular moment. So it moves from like a luxury to a necessity. And when it's become a necessity, it's almost already too late. Like we have to have had it. So I think that can be a wonderful motivator. But like Dara said, no reason to like punish yourself and be like, I'm only doing SOPs for the next 6 months. Like just realizing that it's on your journey to getting where you want to be, not just in your business faster, but in your personal life as well.
Yeah, some great insights there and really valuable. And I think that piece there, one, vocalizing this has actually been very, very useful. And then two, the ability to have to, I guess, before it becomes a necessity. And then that creates some of shows the cracks and the vulnerabilities of operating the way that you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to go back to these two more mindset pieces around identity and fear. You talked about fear being one of the things that's been holding you back here. And I wonder, too, whether it's for you or just for someone in our audience who needs to hear this, you talked about coming from a background where you probably felt for a while like you had to prove something to yourself and in general. And there was probably real impending scarcity things that you had to overcome. And now you're at a place where there needs to be, if there already hasn't been, some reprogramming of that mindset to understand that you're not operating from that place anymore and that you have your basic needs met. And if we're talking about the Maslowian hierarchy of needs, your baseline is absolutely covered, whereby you've moved up to a place where you can look at things closer to the self-actualization, as they would say in the triangle, where you now have that gift. And it's not about how do I just make sure that I have a roof over my head and food on the table and so on and so forth. But oftentimes we don't recognize that those old thought patterns and the ways that we were conditioned from that upbringing or any of those chips on our shoulder that we might have carried with us that could have been real fuel to drive us forward can thus later become the things that are holding us back. And just making sure that there's healing that has been addressed there or might need to be addressed. And on the identity piece, to really be asking yourselves those questions of, if all of this went away, for the best reasons or the worst reasons, who am I without this? Because that gives you the ultimate freedom to grow however you want and to let things not be based in fear, which is something that you brought up. Because so what if someone messes up then? This isn't who you are. This isn't the only thing that matters. This is an outgrowth of something that matters to you. And it's a part of the way that you give back. And it's a part of the way that you fund your life. But it's not who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, that hit. There's, I believe, two things in there that stick out, which is the first one. And yeah, in my day-to-day isn't so much about making sure that, I can eat. And where there were certainly places growing up where that was the case, right? Where it wasn't that great at home. We didn't have enough, of money to get through the things that we needed to go to school or some of those things. And I think that part of my identity still sticks. I certainly have maybe not resentment, but maybe a chip on my shoulder for some of those things in that way. And I've seen it as be a driver for, okay, cool, I don't want to repeat my childhood. And so that's been a very strong driver and motivator to be active, consistently pushing and finding good outcomes. And then the second is that I have a pretty clear understanding. The reason I still live here at the bottom of the South Island in Dunedin, which for anyone from New Zealand will know, this is like not a particularly desirable place to live, but it does hold a lot of what I care about, which is I'm close to the whenua or the land. And for me, I have the identity of like knowing what the core values are and what I hold. And I think I'm okay on that, but I certainly believe that the former is definitely incentivizing or pushing the ladder to make it probably, hey, you need to have these things to prove that you maybe not a poor kid, or that, you're not you're not dumb. You didn't grow up without an education or some of those things, and the need to prove some of that. So I think there's definitely work there, and Dara, you and I have had these conversations previously, some of the coaching and some of the things that we covered, but it is a process for me to probably look more into, and certainly something that I've seen maybe play out in my relationships as well, that I just don't think I've resolved because it's just tough. I don't really think I want to, and maybe because I've also used it as a motivator or a driver to figure out how to grow the businesses.
Yeah, I think something that's really common with entrepreneurs is we're really great at checking the boxes and moving forward and not looking back. And you talked about this being a process. And that's exactly it, that we don't get to just one time address, oh, well, here's this thing and I overcame it and now I move on and now I can get back to business. It's something that's going to continue to show up. Like Kate always says, I love new level, new devil. Yeah. And it's so true, because the more you grow, the more your business becomes a mirror, this real crucible for your personal growth, which I think is one of the most frustrating and fantastic things about business, is suddenly you're in this melting pot where you're like, damn it. Like, I thought I had grown through that thing. I thought the fill in the blank was behind me. But when we pause long enough to realize, like, I'm seeing this thing over and over again, there's something going on here. This is showing up for me to learn something about myself. And until I address it, I'm just going to keep seeing it in different ways. And the business is going to be impacted by that as well. So this is why I, Kate, and I think you too as well, Kale, are such proponents of input has to do with output, meaning the work that you do on yourself is a direct reflection of what you see in your external world and in the results in your business.
Yeah, I 100% support that. And it's I think, yeah, you're right. And there's some, unfortunately, some harsh truths in there again that I don't probably have one to deal with. But unfortunately, you guys have now vocalized it. And publicly, it's like, yeah, okay, there's some more work. There's some more work to do there. But that's okay.
Now you're on the hook. You're accountable to however many ones or thousands or
exactly
people are listening.
Minimum two people.
Plus our audio team. So minimum 5, 6.
Actually, 7. 7 people now are going to be holding you accountable.
There you go.
Oh, exactly. So we'd love to kind of wrap up by hearing your biggest takeaway from our conversation and maybe your first action that you're going to take after having this conversation to get closer to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think it's actually the last part, which is how much of that identity and how much of what work is involved with looking back on what I need to change to allow myself to be okay with possibly taking the step out and being maybe not so fearful of what that might look like, or how that is linked to what I do in my day-to-day. And I think the second one that's been really, really useful is actually for anyone who has this process, and it's probably quite hard to maybe be a guest with the two of you or spend 45 minutes with you both, but just vocalizing this out loud. The questions that you asked were really useful for understanding, for me, what I actually have been thinking, but probably not been able to articulate well. And so the prompts and the questions have been very, very useful because I've taken down notes for myself around what I actually want to try and achieve. And there's sort of those 3 other things in there. But lastly, just thank you. It's been really, really useful. And Kate, great to meet you. And Dara, always good to see you.
You too, Kale. Yeah, I think what you're reflecting is this idea of you can't see the spot on which you stand, which is why it's so essential to have people, whether it's an informal board of advisors or these people that you've brought into your space that you trust enough to reflect back to you things that are hard for you to see in yourself. And you have to be willing and open to accept that while still putting it through the sieve of your own self-knowledge and intuition and other things where you don't just take it all as, great, everything Darren Kate said I should exactly implement and apply. No, you know yourself best. This is one of the most beautiful things about coaching is it's not about anyone dictating to you how things should be or what you should do. It's helping you unearth and see the truth for yourself and then holding you accountable to moving towards that thing. So thank you for putting yourself on the hook here today. Thank you for sharing so openly. We look forward to seeing how that reflection that you're going to do within yourself will pay off in the impact that your business has, both internally in the business for you and the outcomes that you have with your partner and your future family and the revenue too, because all of that matters. Money is a tool to create the freedom in the ways that that is defined by you. So we're excited to see how all of this is going to be a catalyzer for you across the board in all of these ways.
Yeah, so keep us updated. We mean it that you're on the hook, so.
Yeah, spoken out loud, so I have to now.
Exactly. Awesome.
Well, thank you, Cal.
Thank you. Great to see you. Great to meet you, Kate. And again, thank you, Dara. It's great.
Great to meet you. Thanks. So I think we had a great conversation with Kale about a number of different topics, both business related and personal life. And I think that
because the two things are not separable.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's one of the most important takeaways.
Yeah, I find that all the time. People think like, I just want to address my business or I only want to address my life. And you're like, because you're two separate entities and these things don't have overlap and they're not even just a Venn diagram. They are one and the same. And we said it to Kale in the episode that what you do to grow yourself will directly impact the results that you see in your business. And when you're not doing that, he told us off camera at the end, which I think that he'll be okay with us sharing, that it's been years since he's done this type of coaching. And I think he recognizes that, like we said in the episode, if you're not in the process of the thing, it will sneak up on you and you'll continue to see it rearing its head in different ways. So I think it's really important for y'all to think through, what were some of Kale's takeaways and are those questions that might be pertinent to you to ask yourself, no matter what stage of your business you're in.
Yep.
And to think like, where in my being, where in the way that I view my own identity, where are the fears that I have that are conscious and subconscious potentially holding me back, especially the ones that perhaps were the things that were the drivers to your success historically, because that can be so confounding where you're thinking, but this was the reason I did so well. Like you and I both took ourselves to places of burnout because we were so great at being diligent and so great at being persistent and so great at getting everything done and so great at making sure everyone had what they needed instantly.
Yeah.
And like everything, there's duality. So something that can be super adaptive can also be very maladaptive.
Yeah.
And to be honest with ourselves about where those breakpoints are or where we're seeing that and to understand that rarely is anything an all or nothing or a complete yes or a complete no around, well, eradicate that thing or use that strength in only this way. It's no, to understand the nuance and the shades of gray that exist within those things.
I think the other thing that goes along with that so well that's really important to think about is like, this is someone with an 8-figure business and 2 businesses that are very successful. And I think most people listening assume that that type of person is like waking up, skipping down the street every day. And it's like, oh, wait, there's like we said, new level, new devil. There's always something that's coming up that we're going to need to be working on. And so I think that realization that there's not like this point we get to that we're like, like the heavens open and we're like, we've achieved a business success. Check, like we get a badge and we're done. And so I think that that's helpful too, exactly like what you said, where it's like you have to keep working on yourself regardless of what point you get to, because ultimately, even the things you've done really well, they're only a part of you. They're only one part of this entire process. And like Kale mentioning, like wanting that family, wanting these other pieces, like those require new skill sets. And a lot of times they're conflicting skill sets, which can be hard, or conflicting identities or identities that are hard to hold, both at once. So I'm so glad he came and shared so vulnerably, because I agree. I think there's other folks maybe not realizing that coaching like this is not necessarily just to make more money or to have more time, but to be thinking about our whole entity in a different way.
Absolutely. So we hope that each of you grabbed at least one thing from this before you go on to your next thing. Identify what that one takeaway is for yourself so that you will ideally do something about it. If that's journaling about it, if that's talking to someone that can help support you in how you ideate around that, or if it's something that's implementable right now, to take action on it or to create the space that you are going to do that with intention before this becomes just an afterthought.
Exactly. Yeah, it's tempting. So do it now. Even if you're in the car, stop the car. Write it down.
Carefully. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for listening to Your Business Hotline. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate, review, and share with business owners just like you.